Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today, joined by my co-host, Stan Friedman from the lovely city of Atlanta. Stan, good morning, or noon at your place. Hello, Stan. Are you still with me? Well, I guess Stan will. Stan dropped off, believe it or not, but he'll be joining back in, probably just with technical difficulty, and he'll realize it, as we often have technical difficulties. Sometimes they're comical, sometimes they're not. But anyway, here comes Stan back. I see him on.
What
Stan,
do you say
Stan, welcome back to Franchise Today.
Hey, thanks, Paul. What do you say to a guy who can't tell the difference between a mic kill and a kill the call kill? I muted the wrong button.
Well, at least you're not in the technology sector of franchising. Oh, that's right, you are.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
Stan, we have a great guest today in Catherine Monson. But before we get to Catherine, I do want to shout out to Lynette McKee, who was a fabulous guest last week. And I appreciate you bringing Lynette on the show last week. It was very eye-opening, especially as we focused on the food service and restaurant industries.
You know, I think we're in a trend here, Paul, that goes beyond just food service, but I think this is going to be the second or third consecutive week now where we are talking with some of the powerhouses and powerhouse female executives in franchising, what with Shelley and Lynette and now Catherine. I'm liking this trend.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely is the case. You know, when asked in a recent interview, what do you love most about being CEO, Catherine Monson, who, as we know, is the CEO and president of Fastsigns, responded, I'm going to start with what I love about franchising, and that is the basis of what I love about being CEO of Fastsigns International. Catherine says, I grew up in a small family business, and I'm passionate about small business and its positive impact on the economy in our country. Franchising is the most effective business model to help people get into business for themselves. They benefit from being part of a brand with systems and procedures to help them succeed, thus being in business for themselves, but not by themselves. And thus the title of today's show is For the Love of Franchising. Catherine, welcome back to Franchise Today.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be back and be with both of you.
Well, we appreciate you being here today.
Couldn't be happier, and I'm not going to push any more buttons for the next hour anyway.
Or so you say.
Yeah. We know Stan's good at pushing buttons, whether they be physical buttons or mental buttons, right, Stan?
Well,
you know, Stan, as you mentioned about the trend in female powerhouse executives that we've had on the show, especially of late, Lynette McKee, Shelley Sun, and Franchise Today has been blessed with many others, Mary Kennedy Thompson, Dina Dwyer Owens, Marianne O'Connell, the list goes on and on. But, as we've been talking this fall, more and more the subject of the NLRB and the $15 minimum wage obviously keeps popping up. We've heard varying perspectives from different individuals, all the way from the IFA to executives. A couple of weeks ago, we had John Francis on who gave us a totally different perspective in that from franchisee and also as his role sitting on several different boards of franchise organizations. And today, of course, we have Catherine on, and I think Catherine could bring us, some unique perspective, at least another angle of perspective from a company that's, growing quite successfully with even growth in the international markets. So, Catherine, why don't we start off? Maybe you could give us a little bit of your insight into NLRB and the joint employer ruling, and then also share with us some information that you shared with Stan and I right before we went on the air.
Well, certainly, and I think as most people who are involved in the franchise business model, I'm deeply concerned about the NLRB's expansion of the definition of joint employer to now even be potential control. Because if you think about it, the NLRB could then make a case that really any franchisor could have potential control of a franchisee's employees. And so it's deeply troubling, and I think every franchisor is talking to their attorneys and finding out how they need to change their approach to doing business. You know, I've been involved in franchising. One of my guys says I should just say more than 20 years because when I say 35 years, people can figure out how old I am. But, you know, throughout that 35-year career, never once has anybody who's worked for me on my franchisor staff, whether we're talking about at Fastsigns or at PIP, Printing and Marketing Services, or at Sir Speedy, did we ever hire and fire franchisees employees? Did we ever say, you need to pay this employee this much? Did we ever dictate work hours? We never had any direct control, but what we provided, as you said in the opening, was great training, great systems, great procedures, and the keys to maintaining those brand standards, because you want to have that Fastsigns experience of great consultative advice and putting together great visual communications packages no matter where you go anywhere in the Fastsigns network. Likewise, whether we're talking about food or tires, lawn care, whatever it is, that brand standard is so important. And what is, you know, my attorneys tell me that none of my staff should ever talk to a franchisee's employees. And we regularly talk to franchisees' employees. If you think about it, if a graphic designer is having a difficult time fixing a customer's broken file, our tech support team goes in remotely and fixes that file or teaches the employee how to do that. Or an outside salesperson for one of our franchisees that wants to know how to make the right approach to this new hospital and how to get that wayfinding business. Our sales development people are here to coach and counsel those outside salespeople. My attorneys would prefer that we don't talk to none of my staff talks to franchisees' employees ever. However, that's part of the great value that we provide. So it's a really interesting time for franchisors, and it's deeply troubling for me. I'm on the board of directors of the International Franchise Association, had been working very hard to get a rider placed on the omnibus spending bill that is before Congress right now. It'll probably be voted on tomorrow. We worked very hard the last 3 or 4 weeks to get a rider on that to revert to the old definition of joint employer, which is direct control. And unfortunately, we were told that the Obama administration is very against it. It's part of their gift to the unions. The Obama administration kind of didn't support the unions in their international trade bill, and now they're trying to make it up. And this is a way for unions to make it easier to unionize entire franchise chains. And the only reason unions care about that is getting more membership dues. Being in a union, in my opinion, is not a benefit to a business. It's not a benefit to the employees, and this is really a gift to the union. And, of course, the IFA is going to be working again starting in 2016 to find a way to overcome this. But even the bigger concern for most CEOs, such as myself, is not whether the NLRB makes a decision on joint employment. The bigger concern and the bigger risk is the adoption by other federal agencies, and then by extension, the adoption of that new definition by trial lawyers when they look at a situation where an employee feels they've been discriminated against, a franchisee's employee. That trial lawyer would rather go after the deep pockets of the franchisor. So I think that besides the concern of joint employment from an NLRB standpoint, the bigger issue is going to be as this new definition spreads to other federal and state agencies, as well as trial lawyers as they go for vicarious liability. So it could be deeply troubling.
So, Catherine, what do you, you're looking into the crystal ball now that this is reality. What do we go into the new year as responsible franchisors? How do you adjust for this? What do you recommend that even smaller companies than yours are faced with similar issues? It's not even a size issue so much as it is definitional. How do you counsel others in this space to make adjustments for this as soon as the 1st of January?
Well, I would say the one area you want to absolutely discontinue giving even advice on is anything that has to do with, human relations and employment law. If you read the Freshie decision by the NLRB, which came out just a few months before the Browning-Ferris case, a couple things that they said in the Freshie decision, which is why Freshie was not deemed a joint employer, and Richard Griffin even said under the coming new definition, not only are they not a joint employer under the traditional, but even the upcoming new definition, because he knew he was going to be coming out with the Browning-Ferris decision. He said, Freshie never trained franchisees' employees; they only trained franchisees. All of their processes and procedures were recommended, not required, and they gave no advice when it came to union organizing, and that's because a Freshie franchisee supermarket was under a union organizing campaign, and Freshie Corporate refused to provide any advice or guidance. And so I think that whole area of any kind of human relations, employment advice is the area that every franchisor has to get out of. So as an example, for years, Fastsigns has had a templated sample employee policy manual for franchisees that franchisees would then customize for themselves. But rather than a franchisee starting from scratch, here's the basic, customize it, get local counsel to look at it. Now we've got disclaimers all over it. The franchisee has to sign that he understands that it is just an example, that it's not a requirement, that it's a suggestion, etc. We used to be much more involved in interviewing the employees for brand new franchisees, the ones that are not yet open for business. We're not doing that anymore. And very recently, we had a Fastsigns franchisee's employees contacted by the Teamsters Union. The Teamsters Union has a graphic design division, and this local Teamster organizer was trying to get the franchisee's employees interested in joining the Teamsters Union. And the franchisee called me and said, "What do I do?" And having read the Freshie decision, I said, "I can't help you on that. If I give you any advice, I'm going to be deemed a joint employer." But you might want to go to the IFA's website and go to labor.franchise.org and look at what they have, because they've created for the industry some really good tools and resources. I know that at the upcoming IFA seminar, which is going to be held in the middle of February down in San Antonio, Texas, there's actually going to be a seminar as part of the franchisee forum about how do you handle a union organizing campaign, because franchisors cannot provide that advice and guidance to their franchisees, because the NLRB has said that is a sign that you are acting as a joint employer.
I mean, it's a catch-22. I don't understand how you can, on one hand, be deemed a responsible franchisor, and on the other hand, having your hands tied and preventing you from doing the very things that protect brand standards. It's a real conundrum, isn't it?
And I think you're exactly right. And we who've grown up in franchising and have been responsible franchisors that truly care about franchisees having strong unit-level economics, maintaining brand standards, building wealth for their families, who've really focused on that, are very frustrated by this, because it is all about providing great support and great service for franchisees. And now we're having to say, I can't provide that support. Now, as an example, at our upcoming Fastsigns convention, which is going to be in Orlando in early February, thankfully, my Franchise Advisory Council has stepped up, and they're presenting a session on how to handle a union organizing campaign. My attorney is comfortable that my Franchise Advisory Council can do that, even though I cannot, because they're not the franchisor, and they're just supporting fellow franchisees.
This is, the implications, Paul. You talked about franchise development a minute ago. I'm sitting here wondering how would one, in my days of trying to award franchises to the right people that fit the brand's standards and requirements, you can't even tell somebody what they've got to do if they become a franchisee. What are you saying to them? Well, you should do this and you should do that. I'm just trying to, in my mind's eye, even envision how an FDD is going to look under these new standards.
Yeah, an FDD, an operations manual, is going to have any mention of employees pulled out of it. I think Friedman Benson had a conference earlier this year in Denver where they talked about that. I know several of the brands that I'm working with and various attorneys have said the same. So it's definitely creating a lot of paperwork for the new year as we get ready for FDD renewals.
I do think that it'd be good for any franchisor to really look at how they define their brand standards and really get crystal clear on what they are. And I believe that you would be able to then support franchisees in those areas that are brand standards. So thinking about Fastsigns in particular. We want all of our franchise locations to use Adobe Creative Cloud. Why? Because that's the best design software. Most customers will use something. You're going to want to be able to accept their files. You're going to want to be able to do certain things. And so that software is a brand standard. Likewise, Corebridge as the point of sale system is our brand standard. Since those are our brand standards, we feel comfortable that we could then train franchisees' employees on how to use Corebridge or how to use Adobe Creative Cloud. Microsoft Excel is not a brand standard, so perhaps we should not be training an employee in that regard, because there is some concern about providing training to franchisees' employees, but every great franchisor does that today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well,
outside sales is now part of our brand standard. We used to be a more retail reactive concept. Now we're a proactive business development concept. And outside sales, we even are required when you sign a franchise agreement today, as of our 2015 document, you must add a full-time outside salesperson within 6 months of opening your business. So that is now a brand standard. It is now also in our operations manual that having an outside salesperson proactively building the business is part of the brand standard. So we feel comfortable with our sales development staff. We have 3 people whose only job is to help franchisees understand how to manage an outside salesperson and then help franchisees, salespeople, learn how to sell successfully. But that's a critical part of our brand standard. So I think part of what every franchisor needs to be doing these days is really understanding and really defining what is and is not a brand standard.
So, Catherine, do you see any change with this passage of this law? Do you see any change in the direction that large companies like yours and the private equity companies that sit above them are going to view our business model? Are they going to start looking at investment into companies not to help further the growth in the franchise business model, but perhaps buy back units and go company-owned? What do you think that might happen on that horizon?
Well, even before this NLRB decision, there are some franchisors that are heavy in company-owned and others that aren't, and there have been companies that have focused on company-owned and then refranchised those units and then bought them back. So I think that's a decision that needs to be made brand by brand. Mm-hmm. We really believe in the franchise model, and we are committed to finding a way to be an excellent franchisor and not be deemed a joint employer. And that's not an easy line to walk, but it's one that we're going to continue to work very hard to walk and always be listening and learning. Any decision that comes out from the NLRB, we're going to be reading it to see if they further define what they mean by this in regards to franchising. Now, at the IFA's legal symposium just a couple months ago, Richard Griffin, the general counsel of the NLRB, and David Weil, the wage and hour administrator at the Department of Labor, were both there, and they spoke to the general session, the plenary group, the plenary meeting of the group, and they actually said in that setting, we're not going after franchising. I wasn't there, but that's what I've been told by a couple different people who were in the audience. At the same time, I'm not sure I buy that. I'm not sure I believe that. If you read David Weil's book, The Fissured Workplace, he has some very harsh things to say about the franchise business model and feels that it is in place in part to execute wage theft on employees. I mean, the thinking is so foreign to the thinking that we have in the franchise space. And I think he believes it. I just think it comes from completely different worldviews. I'm hopeful that this is not a full-bore attack on franchising, but my other side of me thinks it probably is, even though they've said some very pro-franchising things in that IFA legal symposium.
Well, it's certainly frightening times, and lots of decisions to be pondered over the holiday break as we enter the new year, and some of these new regulations that are going to be impacting all of us. For the love of franchising, it's what we're talking about today, and we're doing that with someone who has lived it and breathed it for years, Fastsigns CEO and IFA board member, Catherine Monson. I'm Stan Friedman, along with Paul Segreto, reminding you that this is Franchise Today, brought to you by the Franchise Foundry, a business accelerator that helps early-stage franchise systems stand up to grow up and assists emerging franchise brands as they manage sustainable growth and move forward. The Franchise Foundry, headquartered in Houston, Texas, and headed by my co-host, Paul Segreto. Franchise Today is also brought to you by yours truly and FRM Solutions. FRM Solutions offering robust, out-of-the-box software tools that are tailored specifically to the needs of franchisors for the management of their relationships with both prospective and existing franchisees. Boy, Catherine, I wish software could all by itself fix some of this, but different times. And, I know that one of your business gurus that you've always aspired to be more like is one that I share with you and Stephen Covey. And in 7 Habits, I know Covey tells us that our circumstances are more a function of our decisions than they are of our conditions. But I think we're all faced with some circumstances and decisions that aren't ours alone here.
At the same time, I really believe in the franchise business model and the smart business people that are involved in it. And if you think back and you look at the history of franchising, there have been other challenges to the model that the industry has adapted to. And so, I'm convinced that we at Fastsigns and with the guidance of the IFA and the IFA convention and sharing best practices, I have the pleasure of being the chairperson of the franchisor forum portion of the International Franchise Association. And when we were together at our last September meeting, we spent time as a group brainstorming how do we as franchisors provide great service and prevent ourselves from being deemed joint employers. And we'll continue to have those kinds of brainstorming discussions, and we'll find a way. We'll find a way around this. Now, I'm also going to get on my political soapbox for just a second and say, let's hope we can elect a Republican to the White House in 2016 and maintain majorities in the Senate and the House, because then we'll have an opportunity to roll back this expanded decision. I wish we didn't have to wait that long. I wish we could have gotten a rider on the omnibus spending bill, but we didn't. And so that's the next step in this fight. In addition to continuing to activate franchisees to visit with their elected representatives and explain how the franchise business model works, because the biggest surprise to me is that we've done such a good job over the last few decades of franchising and building great brands that the typical consumer, as well as the typical senator or congressman, doesn't know they're individually owned and operated businesses. They're viewed as big national chains.
Yeah.
And so as there's some negative feeling towards big national chains, that big Walmart that comes into town and puts out of business those little retailers, or that big Walmart that may not pay its people what we think it ought to pay its people. Well, we've done such a good job in developing our brands that our brands are perceived as big national chains. And we need to do a good job of educating. And the more that we can get franchisees activated, actively talking to their elected representatives, explaining the franchise business model, the greater our likelihood of success in the future of overcoming situations such as this NLRB expansion of the definition of joint employer.
To that point, Paul.
Go ahead,
Paul,
Stan,
to that point, I was just going to suggest to you that last week when Robert Crescente spoke to us at the Southeast Franchise Forum, 2 things that Catherine just said came back to mind. One was, the sky is not falling. It's not going to kill us. We're just going to have to adjust. We're going to have to figure out how to adjust. And the other thing was he talked about how important something near and dear to your heart, Paul, is going to come into play this year. We can't fight with deep pockets and run TV ads and radio ads in every market we'd like to, helping people get better educated on what franchising is all about. But social media, I think, is going to play an incredibly important part in 16 and ahead to helping people learn that it isn't all big business. It's mom and pop and it's Main Street. It's not Wall Street.
Yeah, it's well beyond perception. There's in all my dealings with American Express over the last 4 years, and dealing with some of their senior executives on the Small Business Saturday program, they just have. It's not even perception. It's their whole understanding is that franchising is big business, is big chain, and they like it to McDonald's, and then this is where the perception comes in. The perception and misperception is that McDonald's pays for all the advertising of all its franchisees, and I was shocked. I was shocked when a senior executive of American Express said that and truly believed in what she was saying. And as we went around the room, and there was 13 senior executives in that meeting, all of them thought the same thing. They really did not understand that franchisees are mom and pops mostly on Main Street or any street USA with the same types of investments and commitments as well as dreams and vision of independent business owners. And I think the same thing occurred when Seattle passed their $15 an hour, the increase in their minimum wage. Again, it was chains, big box, and they were lumping franchising into it by making franchising, come to the plate sooner than other independent businesses, obviously casting a distinct competitive advantage to these independent businesses, more so a disadvantage to the franchise businesses.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of misunderstanding about franchising, and going back to my concerns over franchise development, because that's the big bucket that I play in. A lot of individuals, when they hear about franchising, already have some misperceptions. I've heard everything under the sun, some not too favorable, and on. But this is just compounding that, because it's being shown in a negative light. It's almost big bad franchisor, the big meanie on the block. And you're right, Stan. I mean, we have got to educate, and short of having extremely deep pockets and being able to do that through electronic medium, I mean, we have to take to social media in every way possible to educate the general public, as well as all the way up the corporate ladders of these big companies and government, that franchising is really nothing but small business in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of livelihoods at stake. Catherine, one of the things that I know our listeners are always clamoring for information on is in the international markets. So many franchisors emerging, have these lofty goals of going into international markets. And we know, of course, that it's not an easy trek. And I also know that Fastsigns International has really had some success, has had continued success in the international market. That being said, are you seeing any challenges along these same lines or otherwise in these international markets to franchising in general?
Well, you're hearing talk about expanding the definition of joint employer in Canada, in Australia. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we don't hear about that in the UK in the not-too-distant future, because these ideas tend to travel in waves. And I've been talking with my master franchisee in Australia, because he likes to call the franchisees in Australia partners, not even the word franchise in front of it, just partners. And I've been coaching him that that's probably not the right approach. And then recently sent him an article that I saw about some thoughts in the Australian government about looking at the definition of joint employer to really make sure he understood it was coming on the senior But I want to back up for a second and just share some feelings that I have about what we were talking just a couple of minutes ago. I often say to my franchisees, politics is a contact sport. And the folks on the other side of our ideals are small business, free enterprise, personal responsibility, working hard to achieve great things for your family. There are folks on the other side of that ideal, and they tend to be well organized and well funded. So when the unions go on Capitol Hill to talk to their lawmakers, they're paying for and busing in union members from all over the country. When we go on Capitol Hill with the IFA every September, every franchisor is paying their own way, trying to get franchisees there, and we can assemble a whopping 300 people. What we need to do is find a way to really activate our franchisors, because it's disappointing how few franchisors show up at our annual fly-in meeting in September. And we need to get those franchisors then to activate their franchisees. Now, that doesn't mean everybody has to come to Washington, D.C., because it's difficult to get away from your business. It's expensive. But if we could get franchisees to be inviting their local state representative, their state senator, their U.S. House member to their place of business, to host them for lunch, to give them a tour, to introduce them to their employees, to talk about the model, the franchise business model. I hire these people. I manage them, I motivate them, I create the culture in this one location. The more we can get franchisees activated and educating in an experiential way their elected representatives, the better off we'll be. And I have asked franchisors to give the IFA their list of U.S. franchisees so they can be on the franchisee rundown and the Franchise Action Network email, so they can be brought aware of things that are happening. And as an example, last year when the city of Chicago was thinking about rolling out or voting in a discriminatory minimum wage law just like the city of Seattle did, we were able to activate Chicago City franchisees from lots of brands to go to City Hall, to go to the meeting and explain that they're a small business person. And thankfully, the city of Chicago did not adopt the same discriminatory minimum wage language as Seattle did, but it was all because franchisees were activated.
Well, you're talking about something that I think is critically important to existentially for the U.S., not just franchising. How many voters really are getting engaged in understanding the difference between making things happen and letting things happen to you? And franchisees, I believe, are in the same place. We need to get them understanding what's going on around them and getting them more engaged and connected. And I think your point is perfect. I believe IFA even has some type of a complementary membership that enables franchisors to enroll all their franchisees so that they get those updates without even having to pay for it. And they
Absolutely.
can become better educated, and better educated franchisees are going to understand that the impact is on them too, and that there's a 5-letter difference between dependency and interdependency, and that's what we're struggling for here, isn't it?
Right. And then the other plug I'd make to primarily the franchisors that are listening to this podcast would be give to the PAC, give to FranPAC, the Political Action Committee. We are able to invest those monies with candidates that are pro-small business, that understand franchising. We give both to Republicans and to Democrats. But part of what is required in politics is that there is some giving to campaigns, and we're able to do that with the IFA's FranPAC. And whether you give at $1 a day to 365 Club or a max donor at $5,000 a year, those funds really help protect the franchise business model. And we need more folks in franchising to be contributing to the IFA's FranPAC.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely.
Well, Paul, we are rolling up to a hard stop because Catherine, as I understand it, is on her way to DFW to jump on a plane so that she can become a media star yet again tomorrow. Catherine, tell us what you're up to. Tell us what you're up to on Fox News tomorrow.
Well, I get to be on Fox and Friends tomorrow morning. I for my like all 60 seconds. So I'm not sure that this is going to be any kind of media stardom, but we're really blessed that Fastsigns is one of 4 brands that Fox and Friends is going to be featuring tomorrow morning that are brands that are hiring. There's a segment on Fox and Friends, I believe it is weekly. Cheryl Casoni typically hosts it, and it's all about companies that have great jobs. And right now, today, within the Fastsigns franchise network in the U.S., we have 300 open positions, everything from graphic designers to production managers, production staff, installers, inside salespeople, outside salespeople. And this is all about getting the word out about the great jobs that are available at Fastsigns. So I will be out on the plaza tomorrow morning and looking forward to sharing that with the Fox and Friends audience.
Good news is the weather is great in New York next week, so tomorrow, the next several days, it's a great time to be out on the plaza in New York. And for those who haven't done what I did, which was take a look at Fastsigns and read up on some things about fast facts at Fastsigns, I actually found a little note, how appropriate, Catherine, that a fantasy job for you in another life might be to be a news anchor on Fox News. Well, Cheryl Casoni, look out. The next Miss Megan may be on her way to New York as we speak.
Only in my dreams. Only in my dreams. It'd be a darn good dream, though.
Well, we're all dreamers, so go live it and make it real.
Absolutely.
Catherine, I really appreciate you being, Stan and I both appreciate you being with us today with such a tight, hectic schedule, and have a safe flight. And we look forward to having you back on Franchise Today in 2016, right? Yeah, 2016. I keep wanting to say 2017.
Well, Paul and Stan, thank you very much. I love what you guys do. I believe in all that you do to help advance the franchise business model, and I wasn't going to not make this time with you that I had committed to 6, 8, 12 weeks ago. I wasn't going to cancel that to catch a flight to go to New York City. So you guys are important to me. I appreciate the work that you do, and I look forward to being on again, and hopefully when I'm on next time, we'll have some good news in light of maybe we'll be able to make some advancements in rolling back this expanded definition of joint employer. It'll be something that I will be working on consistently in 2016.
Sounds great.
Well, thanks again, Catherine, and we'll all make our luck good luck.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Safe travels. Well, Stan, another interesting topic or continued topic on Franchise Today. I think we've mentioned NLRB probably 6 or 7 of the last 8 or 9 shows. And and I don't think it's going to go away.
No, it's not. But I do believe, Paul, that a lot of it is about adjusting and doing as Covey teaches, to making your decisions what governs where you head and how you get there, not what your conditions may look like at that moment in time. It's easy to say, and it sounds like a few words in a quick sentence, but if everybody were to put that mindset into play, then some of the pushback that we need will come from deep down and inside, and that's where it's going to have to come from. We're going to have to adjust, and we're going to have to press on. Too many lives are impacted by the good that's coming from franchising as a way of doing business, and I don't think that those who are vested and invested as deeply as people like Catherine with 20-some-odd years of her life invested are just going to fall over and let somebody take that away from us without putting up a fight. So I think we're going to learn as we go. I do think that Mr. Crisanti and his mention of how important social media may become to us in 2016 is a conversation that you want to poke in on, because truthfully, there are some organizations that have changed the face of the world in this past year using social media in very negative ways.
Yep.
I'd love to see some of us on our side of the world take social media and help to advance the good cause of franchising and the great work it does and the lives that it impacts by better educating the everyday Joe to what franchising really is as compared to what some union leaders or NLRB are saying that it is and making people believe by perception becoming reality.
Yeah, social media is extremely powerful. It's funny, I was looking through some old posts from 7 years ago where people were saying social media is a fad. And I think it's safe to say it's not a fad. Something I learned today, Stan, and we talk about sensible and sustainable franchising. And I loved what Catherine referred to as brand standards. And that's a big takeaway for me today, a big aha moment for me today, looking at things through that lens of brand standards. And I highly recommend everybody that listens to a show that is a franchisor, do exactly that. Look at your brand standards because I think that's a very unique, smart, practical perspective to shine through some of these dark issues, because the brand standards really are the basis of the brand and who and what a franchise organization is. And I don't think we stress that enough and spend as much time and focus as we should when we're trying to do so many other things as franchisors through the day. So brand standards was definitely a key takeaway for me today.
But the need still to tiptoe around some of the things that you define as brand standards to be certain that you don't find yourself going past that tipping point that dictated something that could cause others to say, well, you told me to, therefore you must be the employer, or you said I have to do this, or something that puts you in that dangerous zone that we're all going to have to learn a lot more about, and how to adjust accordingly to being compliant with what NLRB and some of these new laws are going to force us to better understand without relinquishing the very standards that have built brands to the power that they've been built to, and to the successes that they have brought to the business model of franchising by being responsible and protecting their brand and their brand standards. We're just going to have to learn how to communicate a little differently, it seems like, Paul, and we're all going to have to learn that on a fast track.
Well, I think what's going to be interesting, thinking back to one of our early shows this fall when we talked about what had occurred at Twin Peaks earlier in the year, and that franchisee being disenfranchised afterwards, and for not having control of that situation, and obviously that control went over to the employees there, and ultimately how that has affected to this day other franchisees in the Twin Peaks situation. And it'd be interesting as that legal web continues to get tighter and tighter, how this NLRB ruling is going to raise its ugly head in those type of situations as well.
Hey, we didn't get a chance to do it with such a short string for time, but temptation was there for me today when Catherine was talking about her hopes that the American people will elect a Republican in this next election cycle as president. I just couldn't help but wonder if Catherine, being such a successful female in big business with international experience, might have hopes and aspirations for, say, one female candidate who has international business experience on the global financial and business stage. And given that Catherine and Shelley share such friendship, I don't know, I couldn't help but connect the dots. I just never got to ask her. So we'll save that question, I guess, for IFA and ask then offline.
Yeah, I would put my hat in the ring to be the campaign manager for a Monson son or a son Monson ticket, for sure.
Well, Dan, Paul, I think we've wrapped another one.
Yep, we're wrapping up another one. We'll be on a 2-week holiday hiatus. We'll be ramping back up again the first Wednesday in January after the New Year's. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a happy Kwanzaa or whatever holiday is within your faith. Stan, to you and yours. I know it's you actually have a dual celebration in your household, and so I wish you and yours a very great holiday season.
Thanks, Paul, and the same to you and yours. And I'll let you take it out for us from here.
Sounds good. Until after the holidays, my name is Paul Segreto, wishing you the best, the very best in this great, great thing we call franchising. Franchise Today is out for 2015.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.